around the world this idea of individuals having self-understanding of who they are and being able to tweak that to put themselves into roles where they can be happier and more content and more engaged and more productive. I think that's really the role of a coach, is to help people get there.
Hi, this is Coach Anda. Welcome to Leading Great Workplaces. In this series, I will be talking to successful leaders and other globally recognized coaches on how they were able to create a great working environment by helping people thrive in their role. Through the stories of success and failures, you will be able to gain insights that will inspire you to lead a great workplace and build successful teams. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leading Great Workplaces. The goal of Leading Great Workplaces is to be able to be a resource for leaders to learn about how to create a great environment at work. We are going to be inviting coaches and leaders of different organizations where we can learn real life practices and strategies on how people were able to create great workplaces. Today, our guest is going to be Jim Collison. And Jim is the Director of Talent Acquisition for Gallup. He is also the Strengths Community Manager for Gallup and produces Gallup's Call to Coach and Theme Thursdays. Just an interesting fact, Theme Thursdays was able to get 1 million downloads late last year. Congratulations on that, Jim.
Thanks,
And
Anna.
we
Appreciate
at the
it.
Gallup community are very proud of you for being able to do that great feat. All right, so welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks for having me. It's always great to be with you.
Yeah, good. So, since our topic is about great workplaces, I wanted to ask you, what is a great workplace for you?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad and big question. I'll see if I can break that down a little bit. We at Gallup, we like to say, a great work culture, workplace is strength-based and engagement-focused. And so an opportunity for everyone to kind of work in a role where it's maximizing those talents, right? We have those CliftonStrengths talents that we talk about a lot. The ability to work in a role where those get used, maximized, recognized every day. So a strengths-based environment to begin with. And then when we say engagement focused, it really, engagement is the way we measure that, right? It's the opportunity for us to say, hey, if we put some numbers to the way we feel, what do those numbers say? And it's not the numbers that are important necessarily, but the discussions we have around them. So we have this Q12 product that's available to help the organizations and teams kind of to discover, to figure out where they fit on the engagement cycle. And then to be able to have action planning around it, to be able to do things that increase engagement. We know in a workplace, if engagement is high, there's a lot of great things that happen, right? People are recognized, teams are effective, productivity is high. But it also has some things that help where other organizations struggle. So employees there's less absenteeism, right? We have people who actually come to work. There's less theft in the organization. In other words, people aren't stealing things or time from the organization. It's also a safer place to work. And so we see less accidents in places that are engagement focused. So when I think about, for me, when I think about a great workplace, those are really the two ways that I break it down.
Yeah, that's great. I like what you said also about action, because if you have a great strategy, but you don't put it into action, then it doesn't happen, right? And I think the challenge is really how to make that happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. If we're just talking about this stuff, like if we don't actually do it, right? In the strengths world, we say this, we have this idea of name it, claim it, and aim it, right? These themes. And at the end of the day, if we just name it, and name it, or we talk about great things we could be doing, but we don't actually do any of them, doesn't matter. So we got to actually have calls to action, and we actually have to follow through on those. The beauty of the Q12 is that we can do follow-up assessments to say, have we done anything? Has this moved the needle? And then the discussions to figure out, okay, what continues to do it? I've been at Gallup for almost 14 years. And so that means I've probably taken 28 Q12 assessments, maybe more, because one year we did it every quarter. And so I've taken a lot of them. They never get old, right? Measuring your engagement doesn't end the second time you take it. You need to do it a third and a fourth and a fifth, right? Just to continue to see things change.
Yeah, I love that. I love using that. You're saying you measures. It's not just measuring once, it's measuring 4 times even in a year. And that really helps you just check back on where you're going and if you're able to really implement the engagement strategies effectively. Yeah, wonderful. So I wanted to know, Jim, I know that you're also leading your own team. So you do work for Gallup, but you also lead your own team. So I was wondering if you're able to do any strategies or action steps that help your team stay engaged.
Yeah, it's a great question. So actually, my team exists of the 10,000 certified coaches that are globally placed around the world. So I had managed teams at Gallup. I had individual teams. I was a technology manager for a lot of years, and then began to do some recruiting, moved into recruiting, and then moved into this current community manager role, which is managing these coaches. But trust me, just because they're not necessarily direct reports and just because they don't work for Gallup doesn't mean they're engagement is not important, right? And we measure
Mm-hmm.
that in ways by taking surveys. We just created a brand new panel for our certified coaches where we can get information from them on a regular basis. But I think about the same things when I think about, the first three questions in the Q12. Do I know it's expected of me, right? It's the very first one. Do I have the materials and equipment to do my job, right? The third
Mm,
one is, am I able to use my strengths on a daily basis, right? I'm
mm,
summarizing those questions. I have to ask those same questions to those folks, to the 10,000 coaches that are distributed around the world. In some regards, that makes it harder for me because I don't
mm,
control their pay, I
mm-hmm.
don't control their work environment, but I have all the same expectations that they're fully engaged in their role as a certified coach with us. Um,
Yeah.
and so we long ago, 8 years ago, we thought, wow, we're going to have to find ways to communicate with them, right? It's tough to be a manager if you can't communicate with your with those individuals you manage.
Yeah, those
That's why we
10,000 people. Yeah.
yeah, how do you do that? That's why we created the
Mm,
podcasts, right? We created the
mm,
podcast to be a kind of a
mm,
universal communication mechanism to keep
mm,
people engaged, to keep them in the
mm,
know, to
mm,
make sure that they know someone cares about them, to make sure someone cares about their development, right?
mhm,
So those Q12 questions that we have are in my mind, that in the back of my mind all the time, and we're
mm.
constantly doing things. Last year we created 80 called the coach sessions during the pandemic. 80. That was
Wow, 80
30
is a
more.
big number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
30 more than we had done the year before because we
Mm,
felt it was important to communicate with
mm,
our coaches.
mm.
Um, and so, yeah, that expectation is still there even as a community manager.
So I like how you're saying that even with the 10,000 people out there, and they're not really directly reporting to you or working with you, you're able to still create that engagement. And that's interesting because there are some leaders who are managing remote teams or some leaders who don't have people directly under them, like they're an individual contributor. And so, how do you now um, engage even just the organization or the people that you work with? And I like that you're using Q12 as a guide in making sure that the engagement, that they have engagement. And so I was also wondering, Jim, with those 10,000 people that you're constantly trying to reach out to, is there a way, was there any way that you've measured that, the engagement?
Yeah, that's a super great question. I wish I could do a Q12 survey for them in some ways. I can't. We are constantly, well, in this role, one of the things I'm doing a lot of is just talking to people. So when a customer calls in or they write in and have a question or whatever, oftentimes I'll say, can I call you back? Like, would it be okay if we just talked? And so I
Mm,
get a good feel for where they're at, how they're doing,
mm,
right? It gives me that.
mm,
We have these 5 coaching conversations for managers out of our book, It's the Manager.
mm,
And
mhm,
this is a quick connect. This isn't for me, this is a quick, how you
mm,
feeling? How are things going? What's going right? What's going wrong?
mm,
We interviewed you on Called to Coach,
mhm,
and hearing the stories of how things are going out there in the field, right? How are people doing things? What kind of success are they
mm.
having? Gives us a really good indication of just the overall health. I don't have a great metric for the whole community. We, like I mentioned earlier, we just started this panel.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll have a kind of a representative sample of the community that we can ping on a regular basis. We have done a couple surveys, just kind of asking them how they feel about things. And so we are able to do that as well.
Good. So I like that you've used those 5 questions in asking how people are. And it's, you said it's a lot of feel also, trying to be intuitive about it. And with every conversation you have, making sure that people are still remain engaged. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
you bet.
I want to know also if there are some challenges that you've encountered in helping other coaches or people out there stay engaged.
Yeah, the part of the issue in a especially during the pandemic was just giving people hope that we're going to
Mm,
emerge out of the backside of this thing,
mm-hmm.
and keeping I think my single biggest challenge during the pandemic was what I've called the great migration.
Mm.
All of a sudden everybody's changed jobs. Like
Oh
they're
yeah.
and I when I say everybody, not everybody, but a third, probably, in at least in my numbers, about a full third have are doing something different than they were doing in February of 2020,
Wow.
which is a big,
Mm.
like, that's a
Mm.
big number to see that
Mm-hmm.
many people move around.
That's a big number. And that's like a lot of change going on
It's a
with people.
lot, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this area. Like these are, our certified coaches tend to be a lot of professionals. They're career professionals, so they've been working jobs for a long time. You just don't see that kind of movement. We had some big organizations that had to furlough people. We had organizations that had to let people go. So some
Mm.
of that change was not voluntary. Some of it was voluntary, right? We had people moving for new opportunities. We had coaches that saw this as an opportunity to move into coaching, like their job had been eliminated, or their role or what have you, and they said, well, you know what, I'm a Gallup certified coach, I could probably maybe make a run at a business at this. And that's a challenge, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a small business, you got to get started.
Yeah.
So just keeping, for me, the problem was just keeping track of everybody. And I started
Mm.
back in June.
Mm.
We had lost track of hundreds of them via email. They had moved. We didn't have updated email addresses.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so taking the time, and I spent a lot of hours, and I spent a ton of hours finding people on LinkedIn or finding people on
Oh my
Facebook.
gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
So
we
you
had
really literally look for people.
literally looking for
Huh.
people like a private
Wow.
detective, right? And just tracking them down, finding if I could find out where they moved by doing some cross
Wow.
references. Like, hey, I've even contacted previous previous coworkers to
Yeah.
say, hey, we've lost track of them. It's important that I do. Do
Yeah.
you have a forwarding address? So if you were to ask me my number one challenge for 2020, that was probably it, is making sure
Oh my
that
gosh.
they weren't lost. you know,
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
know. And I didn't know that was happening behind the scenes, Jim. And
yeah,
for you to be able to do that shows that you really care about each and every coach that's out there.
yeah,
And because you're trying to find ways to get them back. Wow.
yeah. It was a lot of work. I have to say I really enjoyed it, though. Like, it
Mm.
was it was fun for me to find people, and when I
Mm-hmm.
found them, little happy dance at that point, like, yes, another one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it that kept driving me as well.
Mm. So I was wondering also, was that the research that you're doing to try to find people, was that something that was that something that you did on your own, or was it something that Gallup asked you to do, the
Yeah.
organization?
Well, a little bit of both. In the role that I'm in, we meet often as a leadership team to talk about how the community is doing and what's happening in the community. And the gal who helps me with the coaches database began to surface these big reports of coaches who were being decertified. And I was like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. And as we started digging into it, I then realized, oh, people are moving, right? This makes sense to me. The solution was just mine. It just needed to be done. Activator number 5,
Mm.
arranger number 1.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
No, there's like,
So
this is
using
just
all
what,
your strengths and pulling it all,
yeah, yeah. I'm not
you
going to
found a
ask
way to do it. Yeah.
communication 4, right? Maximizer 3. So
Okay, use them
I'm
all.
yeah, no, plug them
Yeah.
all in. And I didn't need to ask anybody. It just needed to be done. And so
Mm,
one of the techniques I used, because I didn't, it's not like the rest of my work got less. Like, I hear from managers all the time, like, we're already so busy, right? And I could have said that. I mentioned we made 80 programs. Like, I was busy, but I used a technique that I felt like is working in the cracks. So as I'd
mm,
have 15 minutes between, I'd get off a call early, I'd go over to the bounce report and start looking, right? I built a process where I could kind of keep track of them in a spreadsheet, so I knew where I was at in the
wow.
process. I left
Yeah.
notes for myself in the
Mm,
in the system, so I knew where they were at. And I'd
mm-hmm.
work it 15 or 20 minutes at a time. Every once in a while I might get a couple hours to work on it, but it was
Yeah.
really one of those jobs, like, I set it up so I could do it in between. And I think sometimes when we get too busy, especially as managers,
Mm-hmm.
we feel like it's got to be this big thing, and sometimes it's
Mm.
just the smallest things that matter.
I like that. Focusing on the smallest things that matter. I think part of engagement also is being linking it back to why you're doing your role, I think, and your purpose as well. And so it looks like that's what you were doing because you were the community manager of Gallup and you're just trying to find people. So I think as leaders, that's important to be able to know your purpose and know how to lead with that and also help others find their purpose as well. Wonderful. So, Jim, I'd like to know also, among all the strategies that Gallup does, is there one strategy that you like? I know they have a lot of effective strategy that has worked for the company. Was there a specific action step or engagement strategy that they've used on the organization that has worked for the organization that you liked?
It's going to sound kind of funny, and this maybe isn't the best or the most impactful one, but it's one from this last summer that I remember pretty well. And Gallup says we invented CliftonStrengths, right? That's our tool. You'd think we know it pretty well. Every
Mm-hmm.
employee lives it in all the roles that they do. We wouldn't have to talk about it very much because it's so ingrained in our culture. And what we found during this summer was it was important to get back to basics. And so
Mm-hmm.
we implemented what we called the Summer of Strengths. And so for us here in the United States, right, that summer comes in June, July, and August, right? That's our summer
Yeah.
months.
Mm.
And so in those months, we did what we call town halls. We created special programs. I got a chance to do a called the coach style town hall that focused on strengths, and it was really a drive back to basics. And then because our workload was a little less, we had coaches who had time available. So rather than having them to furlough them or have them have less work, they began to coach everyone in the organization who wanted a
Wow.
coaching session, right?
Mm.
So, and you could
Mm-hmm.
get multiple ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a great opportunity. I was super impressed that in the midst of a crisis, we went back to basics. We too
Mm-hmm.
went back to basics and spent a lot of time thinking about those things that we are best at, and are we focusing? Do we understand what they are and focusing on them? So much like during the last financial crisis, I worked at Gallup in 08 and 09 when the world went through a pretty significant financial
Mm.
crisis,
Mm-hmm.
and we had similar results to what the pandemic has done from an employment, from the way the cultures fell. We measured ourselves 4 times that year. We did the Q12 4 times. Typically,
Mm.
most organizations do it once.
Mm-hmm.
We did it 4 times because it was really, really important to know. So
Mm.
I think if you were to ask me, like, what are we doing right? It was it was great to get back to basics and not be too above it. It'd be easy to say,
Mm.
"Oh, we know these things.
Mm-hmm.
We know this. Do we?" And so it's good to get back to basics.
Yeah, I like that. The summer of strength, and it's going back to
Yeah.
basics. And I think that's what everyone just needed last year. And so you're listening also to what the people in the organization needed at that moment. Yeah. So, Jim, I would like to know, out of all the qualities of leaders, there's a lot of qualities. What do you think is your, like, what do you think is like the best quality that a leader can have to be able to really drive this engagement or to really lead a great workplace?
That's a really hard question
Oh,
because
it's a
there
hard one.
are so many
I know.
qualities, right? That
Yeah.
leaders and managers need to have. We have this construct, this idea of four needs of followers, and it includes things like compassion, like hope. We use like words like stability, and I really think those, as we think about those, um, my favorite out of that is hope. And I think leaders need to be there to, like, people will do amazing things if they just have a little bit of hope. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's an area that, you wouldn't hear, you wouldn't hear a rallying cry necessarily, like, be hopeful leaders, but we need to be, right? When we're in a crisis, we
Mm-hmm.
know. I was listening to Dr. Jim Harder, who's our expert on engagement at Gallup, and he had said every time there's a major crisis, that employment or that engagement actually goes up some because people rally. And in the best
Mm-hmm.
organizations, they rally because there's hope. There's hope at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
tunnel, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think as leaders, listen, as leaders, we have to focus on them all. You
Mm-hmm.
can't. There's no one thing, but I think if you're going to do one thing, is give people hope that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, like that we're
Yeah.
going to get through this thing together. There's going to be better days.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of those intangibles during a time like this, when maybe leaders can't provide stability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not in a position to be the most compassionate. They can be leaders of hope. So
Yeah.
that's
I love
what I
that.
would say.
Leaders of hope. Yeah. And I like the what you said earlier about rallying people, and people are just kind of looking for that, right? So as a leader, if you're able to spark that in them, it will give them hope. Yeah. So one last question, Jim. Since I'm a coach and you're a coach and you lead coaches as well, I was wondering what you thought of coaches and how they are able to help organizations lead a great workplace. How do they support leaders and organizations with that?
Yeah, in our book, It's the Manager, we spend a lot of time talking about this idea of moving from this idea of boss to coach. Does that mean everybody should be a coach? Well, maybe. That's not the idea, though, in the sense that we're beginning to move from roles of high hierarchies where information is passed from the top to the bottom, where managers may just be distributing workloads, where managers may just be telling people what to do, into a role of development, into roles of caring for people and developing people for who they are, and understanding how to get the best out of someone by putting them in the best possible role based on their talents, right? Based on
Mm-hmm.
what they're naturally good at. And so I'm a big advocate that even as a I have 5 kids. I'm a dad of 5 kids. My role as a father is to be a coach to them in too many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that mean everybody gets to do whatever they want? There's never like, no, we still need managers. We still need people to say, this is the way it's going to be, right? At
Mm-hmm.
times, there are moments where someone has to be leading, somebody has to be leading out. But around the world, this idea of individuals having more self understanding of who they are, and being able to tweak that to put themselves into roles where they can be happier and more content and more engaged and more productive. I think that's really the role of a coach, is to help people get there. The role of the individual is to do it as well. So we're not off the hook, right? Individuals are not
Yeah.
off the hook. They ultimately are the ones that drive this.
Mm-hmm. So I love that. I love how you've described what a coach should be. A coach should be someone who cares about each and every individual and finds ways to make them grow. So wonderful. So thank you so much, Jim, for all your insights today and for sharing what you've learned. So for me, what I like the most is about as a leader, you have to give hope. especially during a time like this where people who are losing hope. So it's a question for people out there. How do you now give people that hope with your role as a leader in the organization? Yeah. So thank you so much, Jim. It was great having you today.
Great to be on, and great. Thank you for having me to spend this time with you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.